Assalamu alaikum all. Hopefully all you are doing very well. So in our last class, we have discussed about the terms recruitment and selections. So these are two separate chapters, but we have discussed these other issues on simultaneous process. So first we have discussed about the terms recruitment and different aspects of recruitment. And then we have turned up ourselves into the next chapter that was about selection. So in these two chapters, we have discussed different issues, but in our today's sessions, we will try to have a look on a brief discussions about these two other issues. And then we will turn up ourselves into the next chapter that is about the terms training. And also we will discuss something about orientation. So I will not elaborate my speech right at this moment. So now I'm going to slide sharing, and then we will have to discuss about these two other issues again in a very brief ways. So this is a quick review of the last class that we have discussed about the terms that I have said, recruitment and selections. And then we will have a brief look about the process of selections, as these are the very important aspects of these two chapters, what we have discussed in the last successive sessions. So now I'm going to review these two other issues in a very brief manner. Then we will turn up ourselves into the next topics, which is orientation and training. So before that, I'm going to the actual journey of that particular issues. So in our last class, we have discussed about the differences between recruitment and selections. So why I'm uttering these things again? I'm uttering this again because this is very important for our midterm and final exam. So the recruitment and selection, as these are two separate chapters, now we are going to experience some very common differences or some very important differences between these two things. Now, the recruitment and selections, what are the basic differences between these two terms? This is very important, so I think it should be opened up or it should be disclosed very specifically. So now I'm going to show these things, the very basic differences between recruitment and selection. The first difference between these two is the difference between meaning. So recruitment, as I have said, recruitment means inviting the potential candidates towards the organization. That's the basic theme of the terms recruitment. Whereas selection means choosing the right candidates from the potential pool of candidates. I mean, choosing the right person for the right job. That is the purpose of selection. So if I go to the purpose of recruitment, so it is just the invitations. It is just the process of invitations towards the organization. Whereas selection is a negative process. Selection is a negative process where we try to eliminate the unrequired or the candidates who are not required to our organization. So in that particular case, we try to eliminate the unrequired potential candidates, and then we try to select the actual candidates for our organization. And in recruitment, there is no sort of eliminations, but in selection, there is elimination. So recruitment is a very simple process, just invitations, and selection is not that level of simple process. So as it involves some elimination, so it is a very complex process. And if I tell about the approach, recruitment is a very positive approach, because in that particular sense, we do not go for eliminating the potential candidates. So it is a very positive process. I like to say these particular issues as saying hello or saying hi to the potential candidates. So it is almost the terms that suggest hi or hello to the potential candidates. But in selection process, it is a very negative process, because in that particular perspective, we need to select the appropriate one from among the pool of candidates. So it is not always a positive process. So it involves a negative process. So if I turn myself into the next difference, so that is the hurdles. The candidates have not to cross many hurdles in recruitment process, but in selection process, they will have to overcome different hurdles or different barriers. So as we know that recruitment is a positive process and selection is a negative process. So in recruitment, we will have to face a very minimum sort of challenges, but in selections, we need to face a lot of challenges because we need to prove ourselves, and the recruiters or the employers needs to choose us for the proper way in our organization. So it is a very negative process, and it involves a lot of hurdles that should be overcome by the potential candidates as well. So these are the basic differences between the recruitment and selections. So I'm discussing these things again because this is a very important part. So for giving the separate importance on that particular topics, I have discussed these things and shared these things with all of you. Now we are going to the next slide. That was about the selection process that we have discussed in the last class, in the last chapter. So here is the pictorial presentations of the selection process that starts its journey from preliminary interview. Okay, and this particular preliminary interview starts from receiving applications. So whenever we invite our candidates towards our organization, that's the starts of preliminary interview. Then we go for taking or receiving applications from the potential candidates. So receiving application is the second steps. Before that, we will have to interview them, and we need to invite them towards our organizations. So after receiving their applications according to our demands, according to our expectation, then we need to screen their application. Based on our requirements, we need to screen these other applications. Okay, and then we need to go for employment tests. So what we have discussed in the last class, that we need to go for different sort of tests like psychomotor ability test, like job knowledge test, like polygraph testing, that's what we call honesty testing, or we need to go some other sort of screening or some other sort of test that we need to require for choosing the appropriate candidate. So in the third or in the fourth step, we need to test them. We need to verify their talents. We need to verify their skills. We need to verify their interest towards our organizations. So our fourth step, that is about test. And then we need to interview them. Interview means a face-to-face conversations with the potential candidates. So after interviewing, then we need to have an idea about that particular person's very clear that whether this person is suitable to my organization or not. Okay, so after taking different sort of tests, we need to take his or her interview so that we can judge his or her interest for our organization. Then we need to go with reference checking, because whenever that particular person submitted his or her applications, in that particular application form, he or she has mentioned his reference, whom we need to contact to get a review about these particular potential candidates. So we need to take review from these references so that we can have a view that whether this particular person matches with our requirements. So this is reference checking that we do in the step number 6. And then we go for medical examinations or medical testing so that we can have a check about this particular person's physical stamina, or whether this particular person satisfies the physical requirements that is very urgent for our organizations. So this is very required for different fields of our professions. So we need to check it, we need to verify it in the step number 7. And finally, if all these things satisfy, then we need to hire that particular person. So what we call final selection. So before the final selections, we need to follow these successive steps. What starts from preliminary interview and that ends towards the journey of final selections. So there may be some other different testing that depends on the organizational requirements. Say for example, it might have the requisitions of the different terms, and this is like police verifications, or this is like interest testing, or this is like some other sort of criteria that needs to be overcome if the organizations requires it. So this is just the sample of the selection process that's we discussed in our last class. So by this short review, now I'm going to my actual destinations of today's chapter, that is training and developing the employees. So now we are going to discuss about this very important chapter. This is very important chapter for our midterm and final examinations, because probably there will have one or two separate questions available from this particular chapter. So this is very important chapter for our midterm and final exam, as this particular chapter requires one or two questions. So now we are going to these particular chapters of training and developing the employees. So these are the learning outcomes. So I will not discuss these learning outcomes right at this moment, because I will turn these things at the last or at the end point of these discussions. So now I'm going to the actual oceans of our journey. So before discussing about the terms training, I'm going to discuss about the terms orientation. Now the question is, what do we understand by the terms orientations? Probably we are very sure about this particular terms, orientation. That means introducing our new employees with the organizational backgrounds. I repeat these things again. Orientation means introducing our new employees towards the organizational backgrounds. That means whenever we are making our new employees acquainted with our organizational culture, acquainted with our organizational backgrounds, our rules and regulations, our services and benefits. So whenever we are making our employees acquainted with all these issues, at that particular time, we term it as orientation. So in this particular slide, we are experiencing in this orientation mechanism what we like to do. We like to make our employees feel welcome at ease. Then we need to communicate them about our organizations. We need to make him or her very clear about our expected working behavior. And finally, we need to do all these sort of activities, what we term as a socialization process. So we can say that orientation is a bit of socialization process. That means we are socializing our new employees with our organization. So that's the basic concept of the terms orientation. Why we need to go for orientation? Because we need to make our new employees feel best that this particular organizational place is a very blessing for us, and we need to adjust with that sort of situation. So if that particular person adjusts with that sort of situation, then he will feel relaxed that now I'm ready to go for the working behavior. So we need to make this person feel that he is very relaxed in that sort of organizational arena, so that he can give his best for the future upcomings. So in that particular orientation process, what we try to share with that particular person, that I have shared into the last slide, that we like to share him about the different sort of employee benefits informations. We like to share with him about the personnel policies that our organizations follow, and we like to share him about the daily routines that we like to follow. That means the login and logout time that we like to follow in our organizations, the company's overall organizational operations and safety measures and the facilities tours. That means in that orientation process, or in that orientation platform, what we try to actually share with that particular person about the different sort of benefits and about the different sort of rules and regulation that he or she needs to abide by. So this is the basic concept of the orientation process. That means we are introducing our new employees with the organizational requirements, with the organizational backgrounds. So this is orientation process. Now, after discussing about these orientations, now we are going to the actual destinations of this chapter, that is the training or the training process. Now, the term training, what does it actually mean, or what does it actually give the sense to us. Training and development. These two terms we use very interchangeably, and sometimes we think that these two other issues are very common or very similar. But I want to say that training and development, though they are very similar, but they are not same. Now the question is, what are the differences between training and development? So in the last class, in the last chapter, I have discussed about the differences between recruitment and selection. So some people gauge that the recruitment and selection, they are same. But in the last class, or in also the today's sessions, at the very beginning, I have discussed the differences between recruitment and selection. So the differences suggest us that they are similar, but they are not same. As like the training and development, they are similar, but they are not same. Now the question is, what are the differences between training and development? The very differences between training and development is, training will give us the technical knowledge of how to perform a job. I repeat, training will give us the sense of how to perform a technical job. That means whenever I'm going to do any sort of activity, the process by which I'm getting acquainted about how to perform this activity, that is called training. So very simply, training is a process of giving technical knowledge to an employee. I repeat, training is a process of giving technical knowledge to an employee about how to perform the activity. Okay, so this is not a very bookish definitions that I'm sharing with you. That is from my particular experience, from my particular insights, that I'm sharing the knowledge with you. The training is a process to make an employee acquainted with the technical skill. Okay, say for example, as a faculty, I'm going to provide the lecture. So if my trainers give me the lesson about how to take the class, about how to deliver the lectures, that is a part of training. That is a sense of training as well. So training is just making the employee knowledgeable about the particular job. Whereas development is similar to the sense of training, but there is a difference between training and development. And the difference of this particular terms, development suggests that it will not discuss about the technical knowledge that is being suggested by the training. So training is giving us the technical knowledge, and development is giving us the intellectual sense. That means whenever we are having the touch of training for a longer period of time, then we are getting our development. Now, if I ask you this particular question, like I'm taking or I'm delivering my lectures towards the students, whether this is training or development, the answer will be very simple. The answer will be, it is a part of training, because whenever I'm delivering my lectures towards the students, they're getting sense of their particular lesson. So whenever they are receiving that lesson, that is the part of training, because training will always give us that technical skill about how to perform this job. But whenever these students is getting that sort of training for a longer period of time, at that particular point, he or she is getting the intelligence towards that particular lesson. So that times he is getting the touch of development. So the very important differences between training and development is, training is short term and development is long term. So whenever we are giving the training for a longer period of time, that gives us the sense of development. So I think the differences between these two, training and development, is very clear to you. One is short term, another is long term. Okay, so whenever we are giving training for a longer period of time, at that time that individuals will get development. Okay, so that is the basic differences between two. So I have discussed these particular issues because now we are going to the actual options of training. So in that particular slide, we can see or we can experience that this is the connotations of training. Training is the process of teaching new employees the basic skills. That's what I have said, that whenever I'm going to deliver my lectures, if some trainers or if someone that suggests me how to take the how to take this particular lesson or how to deliver this particular lessons towards my students, that time it is a part of my training. Or say for example, I have recruited a production manager, and as a trainer I'm giving him training about how to manage his particular activity. So whenever I am sharing the knowledge about how to manage the particular activity, that is the kind of sense that is giving us the sense of training. So why training is required? Training is required because we need to have good productivity, and we need to have a good productivity, and for having good productivity we need to require training, because the individuals coming up with a lot of talents, but for making that particular person skilled, we need to go for training. So that is the basic requisitions of training. And organizations will always strive for what? The organizations will always strive for excelling or achieving their strategic goal. So for achieving the organization's strategic goal, an individuals who is very new towards the organizations or to the organization, he must have training, because by this training process he will know how to execute or how to implement the overall organizational plan. So it is very required for the organizations. Now we are going to our next slide. In that particular slide we will have an idea about how the training process occur, or how the training process will go into different successive steps. So in that particular slide, we are experiencing 4 different steps that starts its journey from the very beginning, that is need analysis, and then instructional design, program implementation, and finally evaluation. So now I am going to discuss about the training process, or how does it take place. So first, whenever we have decided that we are going to train our employees, first the task that we need to do, that is need analysis. Need analysis stands for what? Need analysis stands for the judgment that we are addressing, that we need to provide training to our employees. So that is need analysis. That means we are feeling the importance of training towards the new employees. That is need analysis. In the second step, we need to address that what particular sort of training that we are going to provide to our new employees. Say for example, a particular person who has been selected for the financial analyst, so he needs to do a lot of activities in that particular platform. But a person who has been selected for the financial analyst positions or title, whether he might have different skills, but he might have also the lackings of different skills as well. So we need to provide training to those other areas where that particular person lacks those sort of skills. Okay, so as a faculty, a person needs to have a different sort of skills, but he might have the lack in the specific part of area. So in that particular step number 2, instructional design, we need to provide, or we need to develop the decorum of the training, so that the person can get the training of those other areas where he actually lacks those skills. Okay, so that is instructional design. That means in that particular steps, we will decide, or we will decorate those other sort of training that is required by a particular individual. So in the step number 3, what we will do after designing in the step number 2, then in step number 3, we try to implement the training program. That means the things that we have decided that we will provide these things to the new employees, in the step number 3, we are going to implement it. We are going to share these training programs with that particular person, so that this particular person can have the total picture, the clear picture, that about how to perform these particular activities. And finally, in the step number 4, we try to evaluate. What we try to evaluate? We try to evaluate whether we have given them enough skills or not. So in that particular steps, we try to take a feedback from our new employees whom we have already given the training procedure. So whether these training procedure were effective or not, we try to judge these things in step number 4. So the things is very clear to us that we start our journey from the need analysis and we ends up our journey in the evaluation process. That means whether we have given this sort of required training to our employees or not. In the first step, we try to judge it. So that is the basic messages from our training process. Now we are going to our next slide that tells us about training, learning, and motivations. So in the last slide, what we have discussed about the requisites of training and the process of how to execute training process. But the things that is very important for giving training to a new employee, that he or she needs to be ready for taking training. That means he or she needs to be motivated for taking his training. If that particular new employee feels that training is very required for me, then he or she will feel the boost that yes, I need to have training for my particular benefit. So before giving training, I need to, or we need to provide the enough motivations for that particular person so that he or she feels that I need to have training. So first, how can we make this thing sure? We can make this thing sure, or we can make our new employees motivated about the particular terms by giving that particular person's a bird's eye view. That means we can share the requirements, or we can share the motivations, or we can share the objectives of training at first. Why he or she needs to have training. So we can give a very brief idea about that particular issue at first. That is called bird's eye view. That means we are giving a very short discussions about the requirements of training. Then we can make very familiar examples. Okay, so why we need to make familiar examples? So that these particular new employees can judge why training is required. So if we can give him some practical examples of trainers or about training persons, then he will understand that training is very required to perform a particular task. So he needs to give some real life example. He needs to provide some real life examples so that he personally think that training is very required for performing a particular task. So these are very theoretical discussions. So you can have a look about these other issues so that you can make judgment about these particular issues. So now we are going to our next slides that will tell us about how can we transfer our skill. So now the question is, how can a trainer can transfer his particular skills with the training? So the thing is very simple to ask, but the answer is very difficult to provide, because the transferation or the transferring of required skill is not very easy, because the trainee will have, or that person should have enough motivation to get or to receive this sort of training appropriately. So we need to do that sort of activities by following these other ways. We need to maximize the similarity between training situation and the work situation. If we can do the first task very importantly or very clearly towards our new employees, then they will understand the importance of training. So we should make them clear the working requirements so that they can feel, for doing that sort of working issues, I need to get training. And then we need to create a sort of practices pools so that they can go and they can have a check that whether we have given the training appropriately or not, so that if there is anything that lacks towards their knowledge, then they can ask towards the trainers about these particular issues, because he or she needs to improve his or her productivity. For improving his or her productivity, he needs to practice it more and more. Okay, so these are the issues by which, or by following those other issues, we can make our employees satisfied that he is enough skills for doing that particular sort of job. So these are the transferring of the skills, that is the basic purpose of giving training. So in the next slide, what we are experiencing? We are experiencing a building blocks, or we are experiencing a diagram. Now the question is, what this particular diagram tells or suggests to us? This particular diagram is suggesting us about two very important issues. One is task analysis, another is performance analysis. Now the question is, what does it actually mean to us? It actually means that whenever we are going to assess the requirement or the need of training, we need to assess two different issues. One is task analysis, another is performance analysis. Now the first block, that is task analysis, suggests that what sort of skills are required by an individual to perform a particular task. I repeat, that by the terms task analysis, we understand what sort of skills are required by an individual to perform a particular task. That is called task analysis. That means, what does the task require from an individual? That is task analysis. On the other hand, performance analysis is the checking, or is the assessing of the particular individual performance with the actual requirements. That means, in the performance analysis, we try to calculate the deviation between the organizational requirement and also with the individual performance. So whenever we try to assess these deviations or differences, that is called performance analysis. Okay, so task analysis and performance analysis, both these things give us the sense of training need analysis. So there might be a questions in your midterm or final exam. What do you mean by the terms training need analysis? So you can write this particular answer in a way that training need analysis is the combinations of task analysis and also performance analysis. By the terms task analysis, we understand that the skills required by an individual, and by the terms performance analysis, we understand that the gap, what is lying in between the performance analysis and also with the performers analysis. That means the gap lies with the standards with that particular person. So that is the basic concept of our training need analysis, because in the process we have said this is the first steps to identify the training needs. So in that training need, how can we do that? We can do these particular issues by doing task analysis and also by doing performance analysis. So that is the basic thing that we do in the very first steps of our training process. Now, in that particular slide, what we are experiencing that how can we address the terms performance analysis. So in the last slide, what we have seen about the two very important issues. One is need analysis, another is performance analysis. Now we are specifying this performance analysis, and we are suggesting to do that sort of activities of performance analysis, we need to go with different sort of methods. So how can we have an idea about the performance analysis? Now I am giving you the answer that we can analyze the performance needs by doing that sort of methods or by following that sort of methods. Now we are giving the answer of these other issues. First, we can use a specialized software so that we can have an idea that what particular ways we can provide them the training, or what particular ways they lacks the quality. And then we can appraise their performances. We can have the job related performance data. We can observe, we can follow the observation method. We can interview them. We can test them. We can survey their attitude. So these are the mechanism by which we can address that this particular person lacks some sort of skills which are required by the organization. So these are the tools by which we can address these other issues. So in the next slide, we are going to have the clear picture about the different methods of training. So as far as we have discussed that these were the discussions that why we need to have training, what is training, why we need to have this training, how can we ensure training in different successive steps. But now we are going to discuss about the training methods. I mean, which particular way we should follow for providing training to our potential employees. So you can have a check about these other issues. So there are different sort of training methods. The first thing that we can see onto the slides, that is on the job training, then apprenticeship training, informal training, job instruction training, lectures, programs, learning. So these are the forms of different sort of training. So we will discuss it into the very next slides that are coming and discussing about these other issues. So we are going to that sort of different sort of methods so that we can have a clear look about these other concepts. So yes, so in the previous slide we have said different sort of names of the different sort of training methods. Now we are going to specify one by one. So the first thing, that is on the job training methods. So on the job training methods, the first question is, what do we understand by these terms on the job training methods? The thing is very simple. When a particular person get the training by actually doing that sort of task, that is called on the job training. That means you are not receiving any sort of informations by the separate places. Rather, what you are doing, you are taking the training by actually doing that task, what is required by the organization. Say for example, you have been appointed as a faculty to a educational institutions. Now you are going to the class and taking the actual sessions, and the trainers is suggesting you about how to take the class. Okay, so whenever the things will happen, it will call on the job training mechanism. So it is very appropriate and it is very practical sort of training method. Now the question is, what are the different types of on the job training methods? There are different sort of examples of on the job training methods that we experience within the organization. The first is coaching or understudy. The second one is job rotation. The third one is special assignments. Okay, now we are going these other issues one by one. The first thing is coaching. Now the question is, what do you mean by these terms coaching? Coaching means giving the prompt answer to the particular person who is getting training. That means there will be a coach, like the cricket team or the football team that we experience in our country or all over the world, that in different sort of sporting team, there will be a coach who will actually suggest about how to perform that activity. So coaching is the sense, is giving us a sense that is very clear to us whenever a particular person as a trainer giving some instructions to the trainee or the potential candidates. That is the sense of coaching or understudy. That means I am taking some instructions by my particular coach. So that is the sense of coaching, that you have very similar sense with that particular issues. And the job rotation, that is the second part of our on the job training method. Job rotation means transferring a particular persons from a particular job layer to another job position. Say for example, a particular persons have been appointed to the particular organizations as a financial analyst. Whenever he will be promoted to the upper layer of director finance, or he will be appointed to the upper layers of general manager, at that time, that is called job rotation. That means rotating a particular place to another particular place. So whenever that particular person is getting promoted or also demoted, that is a kind of job rotation. Or that particular person may also switch from the similar designations. So say for example, a particular person is doing his task in Dhaka. Now he needs to work in Chattogram. So the designations will be same if the organization requires. So the designation is same, but the working place is different. So that is the concept of job rotation as well. So it can be three types. One is upward job rotation that we call promotion. One is downward job rotation that we call demotions. And another thing that is from the same level or the same tier that we call geographical pre-locations or geographical locations. So that's also the sense of job rotation. So it can be happened in three different ways. So it is a part of on-the-job training. Now the thing is, why it is on-the-job training? It is the part of on-the-job training because it is giving us an idea about how to perform the job in upward or downward trend. So it is a part of on-the-job training, because you will have to take the sort of training by actually doing that sort of task in job rotation. And final thing is special assignments. So whenever I'm giving you the particular assignment, and you need to do that sort of assignment by thinking or by following a particular deadline, then you are doing that particular sort of activities by following that sort of instruction. So it is a kind of training. So after submitting that sort of assignments, I'm giving a feedback about your particular task and the areas where there should have some improvements. So that is also a particular special assignments. So it is a part of on-the-job training. So these are the sort of on-the-job training that we actually try to experience in our organization. Now the question is, what are the advantages of on-the-job training? I'm very sure that if I ask you that what are the advantages of on-the-job training, you will probably come up with some sort of advantages. But for the lecture, for the sake of lectures, I'm giving some sort of advantages here, so that you can cross-check with your ideas. That the first very advantage of on-the-job training is it is very inexpensive. Why it is inexpensive? Because the organization can provide it by giving the organizational knowledge or the working knowledge by actually doing that sort of task within the organization. So whenever the particular employee can get this idea from the organization, it is very inexpensive for the organizational point of view. So it is the first advantage. The second advantage that we can look onto the slides, that is learn by doing. It is the very appropriate mechanism of training from where we can have the first level of exposure from the working arena, and the knowledge that we are collecting from the working arena will be separate from the knowledge what we get from the home or from the outside area. So we will look after these other issues like off the job training in the very latter part of our discussions, but on the job training will give us the sense that it is very important, and it will give us the very strong messages that on the job training will give us the very practical knowledge that is required by the particular training. And another very important advantage of this on the job training method, that is immediate feedback. So we can have immediate feedback by doing on the job training, because the trainers are always available with us, and if we feel any sort of problems, then we can discuss these particular problems with our trainer. So that is another advantages of on the job training. Now we can discuss about these particular issues, that what is the actual process of providing on the job training. Again, we need to follow 4 different steps. First, we need to prepare the learners about that particular about that particular issues. So now we are sharing these particular things again, so that you can have a check about how to provide the on-the-job training mechanism. So here is the slide. So the first steps that we need to follow in on-the-job training mechanism, that is prepare the learner. So for having the training, we need to prepare our trainee mentally, because whenever that particular persons will be mentally prepared for receiving that sort of training, he or she will get the maximum output from this training. So first we need to prepare these learners. Second, what we need to do, we need to present the operations. That means in which particular areas we need to provide them the training. So that is the second very important step. So in the third step, we need to provide the actual implementations of the required training areas. That means in the third steps, we try to implement our required action plans that we have decided before the training program. And finally, we need to again do a follow-up. That means we need to check whether that particular persons have actually got the informations or not. So that is the sort of feedback that we receive from the on-the-job training mechanism. So these are the 4 steps that we need to follow again in the on-the-job training process. So it is almost like the sense of our actual actual training process that we have discussed in the very earlier stage of our discussions of the today's session. So that's the basic issues. So now we are going to the next slide that will suggest us about some very important aspects of the job training mechanism. As long as we have discussed, these all are related to our on the job training mechanism. Now we are going to discuss about the next step that is very important for our midterm and final exam, that is about different sort of tools that are associated with off the job training mechanism. Now the question is, what is off the job training mechanism? In on the job training mechanism, we have said that whenever an organization is giving knowledge to the employees by actually doing the work, that is on the job training. So it is just the opposite of the terms on the job training. So whenever an organization is giving the knowledge to the new employees by sharing or by providing the knowledge from outside, that is called of the job training mechanism. So if we go with some sort of examples, then you will have a clear idea about these other issues. So there are the different sort of tools that we are seeing in these slides: the case study methods, the management games, the outside seminars, university related programs, role playing, behavior modeling, corporate universities, executive coaches. So these all are the different sort of tools that we use in of the job training mechanism. So in that particular issues, or in these particular techniques, we are not giving an employee the first hand exposure, but what we do, we try to share the messages that is very required by that particular trainer to the trainee. So we are going to that particular issues one by one so that you can have a clear idea about these issues. So the first one is case study method. Now the question is, what do you mean by case study method? So case study method means whenever we are giving our candidate, the new particular employee, about the very environmental analysis, and we can throw some questions depending on the passage that he has read, and he needs to answer the questions depending on the background that he has seen on the passage. It is called case study. That means the thing is very sure to all of you, I guess, because we need to face these sort of case study in different sort of multinational organizations or in different sort of areas. So that is the basic sense of case study. And why this is sort of this is a kind of the job training, because by this sort of mechanism, the employee is not getting the first hand exposure or the practical exposure. Rather, what he or she is doing, he or she is actually practicing it, and he or she is actually gauging what might be happened into the future working area. So as this is give us that sort of sense, so this is case study methods, and this is a part of our of the job training mechanism. The second is management games. So it is very interesting that management games means whenever a particular person is creating a sort of environment where there arises some problems, and by creating some sort of problems by himself or herself, he or she is going to solve this particular problem. So that is the kind of management game. That means the organization is creating some sort of problems by their own, and they are asking their employees, new employees, to solve these other sort of problems. So whenever the new employees will come up with the solution, then the organization will give some sort of feedback. And by giving that sort of mechanism, the organization can share their background, their views to the new employees, and the new employees can get the ideas that how to perform the actual requirements by the set by the organization. So the organizational employees who are very new, they can get some ideas by doing management games. Okay, the third that we see from our slide, that is outside seminars. So organization can arrange different sort of seminars for the new employees. The new employees can get different sort of informations by attending on that sort of seminars. So it is another forms of our of the job training. And there is another terms that we are experiencing on our slide, that is university related programs. So university sometimes can arrange different sort of programs uh, in their different premises, so that the potential students can learn about the organizational requirements. So this is a part of training that we get from our university level. That is a part of the job training, because we are not actually doing that particular task, but we are getting some idea about that particular task from our university premises. Number 5, that is role playing. That means the organization is picturizing a particular role towards you, and you are dreaming about this role. And whenever you are performing this particular role, the organization is experiencing where you make some sort of deviation. So where you have made some deviation, then the organization will instruct about how to fulfill that sort of deviation. So that is a particular theme of our role playing. So organization can arrange different sort of program about the role playing to give some instructions to the new employees of the organization. So this is a kind of sense that we get from role playing. So different organization arranges these sort of role playing activities. Then the very important, that is behavior modeling. Behavior modeling stands for what? Behavior modeling stands for the organization can picturize required behaviors, and then a particular person who is very new to the organization, he or she needs to act within this behavior that is set by the organization. So whenever the organization has set required behavior and a new employee is performing that sort of behavior, that is called behavior modeling. Okay, so it is almost like the sense of role playing. So in the role playing, the particular new employee is trying to play a particular role that is stated by the organization. But in behavior modeling, the organization has not stated the particular character, but what they actually do in that particular platform, they have stated different required behaviors, and the organization's new employees, they need to follow that required behaviors. So that is the basic sense of behavior modeling. I will discuss these particular things in my next slide, so that you can have the clear idea about the distinctions between role playing and also the behavior modeling. Okay, so now number 7, that is corporate universities. So the corporate universities, this is a very new terms. This is a very latest terms that we use in the HR perspective right at this moment. So it means that there will have a third party, or there will have a specialized party who will actually do that sort of activities of providing training to the new employees. So whenever we arrange the third parties, and the third parties arrives and gives some sort of training to our new employees, that is giving us the sense of corporate universities. That means whenever you enter into a organization, the organization arranges a third party to give you the training, and whenever you are taking training from this third party, it is giving us the sense of corporate universities. That means you are entering into a new university that has been arranged by the organizations where you have entered very recently. And the final forms or tools that we can see or experience from that particular slide, that is executive coaches. So that's what we have discussed in our on-the-job training mechanism, that there is a sort of tools that we can use in on-the-job training, that is coaching or understudy. So why the things are same in off-the-job training? That might be your question. It is coaching, but it is a kind of executive coaching. So that is not giving us the same sense of coaching that we have seen in on-the-job training. So what is the difference between executive coaching and coaching? Coaching is giving us the actual sense about how to do that sort of activities. But in executive coaching, they will do it by using the computerized system. The experts will give you their knowledges by using the computerized systems, and they will observe your activities by different computerized systems, and they will share their own ideas with you. So whenever they are giving their sense by a remote location or from a different places, that is called the executive coaches. And it is very required for the top level management, because the top level managements will have to take the strategic decisions about the organization. So whenever they take different executive decisions or top level managerial decisions, at that time they try to cross check uh, their particular activities with the others. So this is a sort of training, because you are getting some knowledge from others. So that is the part of our executive coaching. So these are the sort of tools that we use in our off the job training mechanism. So now we are going to our next part that I have promised you, that I will discuss these things for making a clarifications with the role playing part. So behavior modeling is basically the sort of activities that we do by following 4 different steps. The number 1, that is the model effective behaviors. That means the sort of required behaviors that the organization stated for that particular employee or for that particular organization. So first we need to do this. Second, we need to have trainees role playing using these behaviors. So whenever the organizations have stated that particular issue about the required behaviors, then the person needs to actually follow it. And in number 3, provide social reinforcement and feedback. And in the third steps, what we need to do, we need to cross check whether that particular persons have actually satisfied our requirements or not. And in the number 4 steps, we need to encourage the transferring of the training to the jobs. That means after analyzing where or in which particular areas that person has actually made some mistakes, we need to instruct that particular persons in an appropriate manner so that they can have the right sense of doing that task very right manner. So in role playing, we are not following these all other issues. We are just setting a character, and we need to ask our employees, new employees, to perform that character. But in behavior model, we need to follow a particular steps for doing that sort of activity. So in role playing, we are just setting a character, but in behavior modeling, we are not setting a character, rather we are setting different steps. And by following these sort of steps, we need to provide training to our employees. So that is the basic sense of our behavior modeling. Okay, so I guess the thing is clear to you. Now we are going to the very last steps of our today's sessions. That is the very important, and I guess there might have a questions in your midterm exam, that how can we manage organizational change, or how can we implement change within our organization? Because if I ask you this question, why training is required? Because we need to change the mindset of our new employees, that they have come up with the very good talents and they have come up with very good organizational, or I can say the family backgrounds, as family is an organization. So they have come up with a very good family backgrounds, but these sort of attributes are required by our organization. So we need to have change. When Barack Obama in 2009 US elections, they have come up with, his team has come up with a particular motto that America needs changes. So with these terms, we actually use in our organizations also. So organizations also require different sort of changes for their improvement, for their betterment. So we can instill our changes by following 3 different steps. Number 1, that is unfreezing. Number 2, that is moving. And number 3, that is refreezing. So we can implement our required changes by following these 3 steps. Now the question is, what do you mean by unfreezing? What do you mean by moving? And especially, what do you mean by rephrasing? Okay, the very important sense that we get from that particular issues by following this particular slide. Unfreezing means, for having a change, for implementing a change, we need to forget the past. That is the first required thing. Because if we cannot forget the past, then we cannot implement the new required one. So we need to address at first what are the particular areas that we have made mistakes, and we need to forget these sort of behaviors so that we can instill the newer ones. So first that we need to do, that we need to forget the previous activities. That is called unfreezing of our job or unfreezing of our behavior. So we can have an idea from our slide that establish a sense of urgency. That means we need to feel that the change is very required. Then we need to mobilize the commitment of solving these problems. That means what we are doing, we need to forget the previous activities so that we can instill the newer ones. So in second step that we are doing, that we are moving to our actual required behavior. That means after forgetting the past behavioral activities, then we are going to our second steps of moving stage. So in that particular case, what we try to do, we try to create a guiding coalitions. That means in which particular areas we need to bring change. Develop and communicate a shared visions. That means the visions that we need to follow for having the betterment of our organization. So in that particular stage, what we try to do, after forgetting into the first stage, then we are moving to the actual one. And the number 3 or third step, what we try to do, we try to instill the actual one. That means after forgetting the first one, then we are moving to the actual one. And in that particular stage number 3, we are trying to perpetuate our required behavior. We are trying to actually instill our required behavior. So we can have an idea from our slide that reinforce the new ways of doing things. So in that particular steps, what we are doing, we are trying to actually implement and actually perpetuate our required behaviors for a longer period of time. And we need to have monitoring. So for the betterment of our organizations, we need to monitor and also assess our progress. So these are the 3 steps that we like to follow whenever we are going to bring a change with our organizations. So these were the discussions from our today's class. So now we can have a look of our learning outcomes so that we can relate what we have covered in our today's sessions, so that we can actually suggest some very important areas for our midterm and final exam. So these were the learning outcomes that I have not discussed on the very inceptions of our discussions of these chapters. So the first requirements was summarize the purpose and the process of employees orientation. So that's what we have discussed into the very beginning of our chapters. So employee orientation means introducing our new employees with the organizational backgrounds and also with the organizational requirements. Then we have listed out about the different steps of our training process. We have discussed about the motivations of the trainee and the trainers, and we have also discussed about the different aspects of training mechanism. We have discussed also about the on-the-job training and also the off-the-job training. So these are very important for our midterm and final exam. So there might be a questions in your midterm exams that what are the different tools that we use in our on-the-job training mechanism. Okay, so whenever the questions will appear before like that, so you will have to answer 3 different mechanisms. One is coaching or understudy, then job rotation, and special assignments. But the question may be as like, what are the different tools that we use in off-the-job training mechanisms? On that particular issues, you will have to discuss about behavior modeling, role playing, lectures, or so different sort of executive coaching. So you'll have to discuss about these other issues. So this chapter is very important for our midterm exam, and I guess you will have a clear look about these particular issues very well. And inshallah, in our next class, what we will discuss about the performance appraisal, because after getting training, we need to actually perform the actual task, and for assessing the task, we need to go for performance appraisal. So our next chapter will be performance appraisal, and then we will discuss about the compensation or the service and benefits parts. So hopefully there will have a very enthusiastic discussions in our next class, and I hope your very best of luck for the journey, and I hope your very success in the life. So I wish you very success, and if you have any questions, you can put it onto your different WhatsApp and Messenger group. I'm ready to give you the answer. So I wish you very best of luck, and take care and be safe and be with your family. So thank you all for attending onto the today's sessions. Thank you.